and welcome to the Deer IQ podcast, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, and we're in the first episode in our exciting and highly eye-opening new series, Mature Buck Mindsets, looking at the mind of big bucks and big buck hunters and just how they're exceptionally different than most. And again, the season theme is how to consistently take the top deer where you hunt. In this episode, I'm joined with the infamous Tony Lapratt, who I joined at his house/museum, and he reveals what over 40 years of studying deer and doing thousands of land plans for hunters has taught him about the biggest and smartest bucks out there. It's a really good and high IQ talk, and you can download the free journal below to use with that. It's really going to help keep track of all the nuggets of whitetail wisdom. So, here are the top things to look for during this episode. From Tony's years of experience, what does he say is different about mature bucks than all other deer? What are the biggest mistakes Tony says hunters make when hunting mature bucks that they keep repeating and don't even realize? What are the mindsets that consistent mature buck hunters have, and what do they understand that other hunters just don't? Why don't most hunters get a stockpile of big bucks on their property? Exactly when does Tony start hunting, and why does he choose this precise time? What is the real cause of big bucks avoiding certain areas like your stand locations? And there's a ton more good stuff in there, so let's get to the podcast and up your deer IQ. All right, I'm here with Tony Lapratt, and we are at his, as you can see, his awesome, I'd say the lair of Tony Pratt here. Tony, thanks for having me here, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, it's my honor. I'm always happy to be in my classroom.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah. So before we dive in here, there's a lot we can talk about. First, just give us a little background. I'm sure a lot of people know who you are. For those that don't, I know a lot you could say, but give us a little background about you and what you do.
Well, one of the things I'm proud about is Steve Bartella and Deer Hunting a long time ago named me godfather of modern day land management because I was doing it for a decade before anybody even thought of any of this stuff. I'm considered one of the most innovative men in whitetail world, and because I came up with buck beds, doe beds, and literally 50 things that nobody thought about. And another thing I'm very proud of, I've been consistent for 39 years, and I've killed 65 big bucks. So if anyone wants to take that into perspective, if you're 40 years old, to be within my realm, you'd have 40 big bucks on the wall. People don't realize I'm proud of being consistent because that is one of the toughest things to do in the whitetail world, especially in Michigan and the Midwest where hunting pressure is so hard.
Yeah. And you've done how many land plans in your...
I've done over 2,400 properties in the United States in 29 different states.
Yeah, that's a lot. So that's kind of his background, where he's coming from. And so we're going to jump in this first segment. We're going to talk about mature buck mindsets. And we're going to look at it from the deer side, but also the hunter side. And later on, we'll do a segment where we'll look at some of these bucks in particular that you see on the wall here. But let's start there, Tony. If we could jump into the mind of a mature buck.
Well, there's several things.
What would we see?
That opens up for like 20 different questions could be asked. But I'm going to tell you right now, most people do not realize how they use other deer. So one of the biggest things people don't realize is a lot of guys don't realize that buck never has to see you to figure you out, because most guys get figured out by the alpha doe and the beta doe, and that buck watches them. So a great example is I go into a property and I'm walking usually with 4 or 5 guys. I go into this nice little food plot that they consider a killing food plot where they want to try to kill a big buck. The problem is they got one stand in the corner, and I go, how many years has that stand been there? And they said, well, it's been there about 12 years. And I go, whose stand is it? And they go, it's community stand. Everybody gets to hunt it. So here's the problem. When you put one stand in a food plot, every time something goes wrong, it's the same tree. So now what happens, a doe walks in And it's the first day of the season, and the first thing it does is it glances up at that tree. When that buck sees that doe walk in for no reason and look up at one tree and not look at the other trees, he basically backs off. And a lot of these guys don't realize by shooting does in a tree stand, you dramatically drop your chance of killing a buck because other deer seen what happened. So none of my stands have ever killed a doe. I always put a minimum of 2 stands at every location, most times 3. And that way I can bounce around and the deer can never figure me out. Most people do not realize that buck watches everything. So then that made me actually make bucks more calm because I can bring him to a corner and build the ultimate lookout so he can set in cover and still have a peek hole out into the field. No different than a hunter wants to be up and the other deer don't know what's going on and you're watching. Bucks want to watch. So I learned a long time ago, design these 20 yards from your stand, give the deer cover and a place to stand and basically can be able to see the field. And now the buck will come to that corner versus all the other corners where he just got to step right in. There's 100 little things. Then another thing that's really important, a lot of guys are passing up bucks. And they're passing up 1.5, 2.5, and even 3.5. But they don't get a stockpile of big bucks because they don't understand one thing. A big buck, every year he gets older, he gets smarter. Okay? When he gets at 3.5 years of age in Michigan, he's smart. He starts looking around, you got square boxes everywhere. You got shooting lanes. Your food plots are too big. Your woods ain't designed right. It's too open in most areas they got to travel through. He is loyal to nothing but habitat, and he believes in security. He will move down the road 3 to 5 miles or farther if he has to. And most guys are not building a stockpile because their property doesn't match the age structure of the animal they're trying to hold. So what you have to understand, a 1.5 and a 2.5 acts like a doe most of the time. And most guys build their knowledge on them animals. And to really understand big bucks, all I did is studied mature animals. That's why I have mature animals come out and I don't shoot them, because I learn from them. And if you shoot them, you can't learn from them. So my whole life was studying big bucks from the beginning. And I realized they're a whole different animal. They look at everything differently. So what most hunters should realize, if you pass up bucks and you ain't getting a stockpile, a red flag should go off in your head. It means your property ain't matching what the deer's mind is. Then the other thing is, you should be finding lots of sheds. Most people don't find sheds. I find tons of sheds. And that tells you ain't doing a good job on bedding area. And to break it all down quickly, beds are king. There's nothing else. People think great food plots and all that. Food is an important part of the puzzle. But you give me the best food plot ever designed, or a 5 acre, or even a 1/2 acre of a great bedding area, there's no competition. I'm hunting the bedding area because the bedding area, a buck spends 70% of his life on his belly. The remaining 30%, 20% will be in his core area. A food plot, he can feed from 10 o'clock till 3 in the morning, and you'll never kill him. His bedding area is where he spends his most time in his life, and most people are hunting a buck that lives across the street. That means you don't even have a 10% chance. Hunters like me, we do not waste our time. We hunt 90% zone stands, not 10%. Most people are in a 10% stand. I'm not a better shot than anybody else, but I understand deer behavior and deer, and that's what makes me shine year after year.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So basically, you're playing the odds pretty much, right?
Yes.
You figure out the odds of where these bucks, terrain-wise, habitat-wise, are actually going to be.
Yes.
Once again, Michigan 3, other states it's probably a little older, maybe.
Yeah.
Where there's a huge
change.
See,
a deer you take like out in Kansas or something, a 5.5 doesn't even start to compete with our 3.5s. Our 3.5s is so much smarter than him.
Knowledge-wise,
knowledge-wise, because they don't have contact demand. That's all how they learn. And so a lot of guys think it's all about antler size. Has nothing to do with it. Age is how an animal gets smarter, and you'll see how they change totally every year. They get smarter, and less times you'll see them in big food plots. So the other thing is, guys are hunting these big food plots, and I go, guys, the only time you'll catch that buck is when it is late season, super cold. Will he come into them great big food plots? You might have a chance first couple days of the season, but really, I don't even ever hunt a big food plot because it's also a nighttime bedding area and you can't get out. And once you educate the does, it goes back to what I said earlier. A lot of guys hunt a big food plot, bust does out walking out that night. 3 nights, all the does are on high alert. They're snorting, smelling everything and nervous. And now they were coming out at 3 o'clock. Now they're not coming out till 5 o'clock. It's dark at 6. You've already warn that big buck about everything in your intentions. So now he is more nocturnal and he is twice the animal because he goes, we have predators here. Right. All summer long, the does weren't acting like that. 3 days of hunting, you put everybody on high alert. And I go, guys, you have to sucker punch the big bucks. And you have to understand how to get in and out. And we'll get into that later on in some of the questions, I'm sure.
Yeah. So the next question I have here is, what are the biggest mistakes hunters make when they hunt mature bucks? You might have kind of already answered some of that. But
No, yeah. One of the main things is they hunt too far from where the buck beds. You got to understand this buck, he is nocturnal in nature, but I don't like to use that. If he don't have no hunting pressure, he'll move. Right. But he never leaves first. He sends the women and children, the does and the young deer. He'll send the young bucks out, and he all sits back and listens. If there's no snorting and stomping, he's always a step behind him. The point is, most people are hunting too far from where he beds. You got to understand, a doe may cover 5 football fields in a few minutes. That buck, every 50 yards, is a lot for him to cover. Right. So he moves extremely slow, and most guys are setting out here, and the buck's main zone that he will be at during daylight is here, and most guys' stands are setting outside of it. Now, that don't mean you go set right on his bedding area and spook him out of the bedding area, but you need to get as close to it, and you also need to be in a spot that he'll walk in during daylight. So, guys, you can't be hunting on a huge field. You want a little satellite food plots where the does walk in and look at it. They don't even want to spend 10 minutes there, and they're gone. That is exactly what you want. It brought the does in. They ate for just a few minutes, and they moved to the better food. Now you separated the buck and doe, and this is where my trap is. So you got to give him a place to stage up, and I build social hubs where all the bucks can gather, mark territory, and that's where I kill my bucks, not out on the bigger fields or the bigger edges. So really, that's why everybody should learn how to create beds, understand when they are in a bedding area versus not a bedding area. Because most guys, when I walk their properties, their stands are not close enough to the buck bed to be efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. So it's kind of like an assembly line of sorts, right? You have the hierarchy of sorts of deer that come out by time, and the big bucks always last, and so he gets the benefit of all the
that's all he does.
Everything.
That's what I talked about, how he uses other deer. He sends the button buck goes out, right. Then pretty soon the alpha doe's trying to figure out what her son's doing, and she's out there. And now the whole doe group's out there. Then pretty soon the young bucks start following out. And this buck is back in his bed listening to everything. And if everything comes running back, he ain't heading that way. So when everything's calm, he's always a step behind. And that's how he's using it. That's how he gets old. He's never leads the way to nothing. And so most people don't realize when you're busting deer or getting down out of your stand or shooting does in the first part of the season, the does are the time setter of that whole property. So they were coming out at 3 o'clock, and you believe you need to shoot a couple of does where you're really after a big buck. I'd never shoot a doe in the first part of the season. it will ruin your whole season. First of all, you shoot that doe. Now the other doe groups go on high alert, and they now coming out at 5 o'clock. It's dark at 6. The buck is always an hour behind, so basically the bucks are nocturnal. You end up, there's 4 or 5 guys hunting the prop. They all shoot an early doe. Each doe was 2 days of rut activity. So now you lost 10 days of rut activity on that property, and you got every deer all nervous. And it's a ripple effect. It's always, there's no magic bullets. It's 100 little things that nobody thinks about. And guys that are like me that consistently kill big bucks in a few days every year, we do not make classic mistakes. It ain't that I didn't make them, but I make them one time, and I think about what happens, and I go, I'll never have it. Then you're going to be one of them guys, kills a nice buck every 10 years, 1 or 2, and it ain't that your skill level as a hunter, shot placement and everything, can be all the way up here, but you can't get him to sit 20 yards from you. And it's the little things that keep you from that goal.
Yeah, there's a difference between, I call it like luck, basically. You're going out there and you're getting lucky every decade or so versus guys that do it every year. It's a very strategic, super strategic thing.
Yes,
right?
Everything is thought out.
The when and the where and everything is super exact.
Yeah.
And, you talk about that. I think about all these early seasons now we have in Michigan, and a lot of states do. We have an early doe season, we have a youth season, and those are pretty much just red alerts to any of the big bucks, right?
Yeah, and so on me, I don't even start hunting till the 25th of October, give or take a day one way or the other. I don't even get nervous. And everybody thinks they have to go out there. And I learned them are the dog days of deer season. The other thing is any of your scent lasts for 3 days minimum at that time. And most guys are going out and leaving a ton of classic mistakes. Then when it gets prime, the buck is already wise. He's changing his pattern, and you're set up for the old pattern. And all of a sudden, you're always a step behind. And me, I've let him go and make scrapes and go and check out. Hasn't smelt me one time. Cold front comes in around the 25th. I go to my stand closest to his bedding area where he's going to be getting home late on scrapes or coming out first, hunt from dark to dark. I'll kill him usually in my first to second day hunting him. Every time.
Yeah, you're waiting until the odds are
in my favor.
Highest in your favor possible.
That's right.
Right. And because anything before that, you're risking educating.
Yeah,
and
all
that
here's
stuff.
the other thing that people have to think. It takes a lot to have a mindset like that. Because what it means...
Okay, so here is your high IQ moment. Much of what we're talking about in this podcast relates to what I've been calling the strategic hunt or the surgical strike. An exact move you make, which is predicated by a lot of other moves to determine the exact time and place to hunt. One question that comes up on a property is about shooting does. When do you best do this? So let's answer that one. I personally would advise having certain stands and times of year to shoot does that you reserve for just that, and waiting until your buck hunting is done. And that is if you really want to thin the herd out. That way you aren't alerting bucks you're after to the fact that they're being hunted, and you aren't shooting yourself in the foot by your intrusive activity in his domain. And believe me, shooting a deer and hauling it out of the woods is an intrusive thing that will alter deer movement. Something to think about if you want to consistently take the top deer and mature bucks where you hunt. And if you want to become a more deadly and consistent hunter on mature whitetail, the biggest thing you can do to help you get there is actually know where you need to focus and improve. The Deer IQ test is the only thing out there that will tell you exactly that and take years off your learning curve. It objectively lets you know your strengths and weaknesses in the 6 core competencies of highly effective hunters, so you can stop guessing and get right to what will really make the biggest difference for you as a hunter. Take that and get the free consultation with it below, and also check out our other great Deer IQ services. Alright, and now let's get back to the podcast.
It takes a lot to have a mindset like that, because what it means is I'm very confident in my person. Anybody that's really good at what they do, people will mistake them for being arrogant. I'm a man that understands deer. I've studied them for over 40 years hard. I have confidence in what I know, and I move in. Most guys don't believe in themselves enough, so now they want to put numbers. They want to hunt more times because they don't really believe in themselves. And I'm kind of like Michael Jordan, 5 seconds on the clock. I want the ball. I'm not scared.
Right, yeah.
It's confidence that makes me go out and go, I'll get him in a day or two.
Confidence and
with
even knowledge.
That's what it is.
It
always goes back to knowledge.
If you don't know, then you make those classic mistakes where you're just hunting every day. You think hunting harder is the key, which it isn't at all.
It ain't.
It's the being very strategic. Now, let me ask you this. So you wait to the 25th of October. It makes the most sense, right? If you saw a buck that was daylight active where you could shoot him October 2nd,
I would go after him, but I don't even go pay attention at that time. And there's guys that will. That's really one of the best times is right off the bat or towards the end of October. Yeah, in between is the dog days. So I always tell everybody, I don't hunt the early days. Just don't even do it. I have too many things on my plate because I'm always working, doing properties. But if you don't get him in 3 to 4 sets, you need to just back off and leave that buck alone because you should have got him right off the bat. Now every time you go out is making him be a lot smarter. So I go, can't get it done then? Be smart enough to back off, wait until around the 25th, come out and slam him again, and you'll get him. The early days are hard because a lot of things can change at that time. And I don't like the rut. So I'm one of these big hunters that don't like the rut. And everybody always loves the rut. The rut is the only time I can't tell you what my buck's doing. I don't know what girl coming to eat. So the scrape period, he's still using his bed, and he has a pattern by licking branches and scrapes how he's traveling. I know all them. I designed them. So now I can go in and get him killed, and I get him killed very easily. Now, what people don't realize, when I go and only hunt a couple of days a year to kill my big buck, my property is like a sanctuary, and I don't like using that word because most people they got it misunderstood. The deer think that no one's hunting them here because I get in so quick. Now, if you are out there hunting all the time, the does have changed. Use your own watch. Look at what the deer are doing on day one, and after 4 sets, look at your watch when deer approach and all the difference they are. And I'm going to tell you, that buck watches everything, and he uses other deer. Your deer should never change. So in the first part of October, my deer are doing something. At the end of October, they're still at the same time frame. Gun season starts, my deer do not fluctuate movement. If you want to know you're doing a good job, right there, most guys, after the first day of gun season, it's all over.
Right, yeah, no chance after that. And
that means they don't have bedding areas or the deer have figured them out dramatically.
Right, and the rut, I call that like it's the gamble, right?
Yeah.
It's your hunting is you're just gambling on lower odds percent chances, where before that I think there's just a few days a year, and I think you mentioned them, maybe the first day of season, some day in that last week of October, and then late season where it's just the highest odds you possibly have.
Yes.
Is those times.
Yeah, when they're basically starving, like southern Ohio, they got that late season. Most of the big bucks are killed in that late season because they ran down after the rut.
They got to eat.
And they got to eat, and they go to food. People don't realize all I do is hunt the prime times. And because I do all my research and my knowledge is there, I don't even hunt the first part where I could be very consistent if I wanted to. But at that time, I just get done working. I don't want to switch right over and go into my deer hunting mode. So it buys me time.
Well, too, there, though, you have if your property's set up correctly, which you've been working on for so long, they're safe there and they know it. So if you hunt a bunch early season, and this is what I think a lot of people do, that you're just driving deer somewhere else.
That's what they do.
You're helping out the neighbors. That's what you're doing. And so by staying out, you're just helping yourself more, even though like so many guys are very caught up in like, oh, it's hunting season, I want to hunt, which is great. And I'd say go find some public land if you just want to get the itch out.
That's what I would tell people. Don't hunt your prime spot. That's what your buddy's for. On his.
Yeah. All right. So that gets into mindset quite a bit. Is there anything else that a mature buck hunter has as a mindset?
Well, one thing else that, going back to a classic mistake, most people overhunt stands. And my stands, they hunt with too few of stands, and they overhunt stands. And guys, on my property, I have over 25 stands. I only hunt a couple of days a year to kill my bucks. Most of my stands haven't been sent in 10 years.
Right.
More than that. The point is they're ready to go, and how can a buck pattern me when I could literally go out and hunt 20 different stands and be in great spots? There's no pattern. So if you really want to kill the ghosts of the woods, you got to learn how to become a ghost. So at my boot camp, I take great pride in teaching people how to be the ghost in the woods by the way you enter, exit, tactics, when you make your move, when you stay away, and how you set your stands up. Now, the buck can't pattern you. Most people, the most easiest thing to pattern on the property is the people that hunt it. They have their same way in and out, and they never vary different areas, and before you know it, every doe knows where they're at. And that's why I go, guys, classic mistake. I would not climb in a stand when a doe walks out and just looks up at my tree stand.
Right.
If she did that, I would just go, this stand will never be hunted again by me. Because the bucks now know what it is.
In some of that, I talked to Doug Roberts. I don't know if you know him this past year, Conquest Sense, but he has a deer farm. So he's observed deer for 30-some years every day, right? And he talked about that too, where he thinks that like deer will actually teach other deer about that.
They do.
And so they'll avoid, there's generational knowledge being passed down. And if you keep going to the same stand where you've got busted before, your odds are lower.
Guys, you all seen it. A doe, when she sees you, she's bobbing her head and she's going to snort and everything. But what she does in the first part of the season, she'll look right over at her fawn. And that fawn will come right over by her. And she'll look up at that thing and stomp and look at that fawn. And pretty soon the fawn's over there going, whew, whew. She just taught it that there's the problem. Then she does multiple blows and take them away. She is the teacher of the woods. That all the adult doe is, the alpha doe. She is the teacher of the woods. Bucks are like coyotes. They don't try to find the danger. They don't try to figure it out. They're going. They hit your scent. They kick it in high and gone. A doe, she smells you. She don't run. She wants to figure out where you're at and she figures out all this before she leaves the field.
And tells everybody else.
That's right. And the buck learns, you just watch her. She'll tell you where every issue. So a lot of guys are setting in a stand and they have buck rubs and scrapes all around their stands. Looks hotter than heck. But the does, when they come by, always stop to check them out. And then when they do see a buck, he's always out of range, 50, 60 yards. They see the big guy. They try rattling, grunt, and go, yeah, I seen him. But he didn't come over. He knows that at night you're not a threat, so he walks down the trail, rubs and scrapes. During daylight, he goes, no, that's where all the girls are nervous, and he puts a hook on it. You cannot draw him into that area during daylight hours. So I go, guys, all my rubs and scrapes are underneath my stand. I shoot my buck under 20 yards all the time, and that's where he travels. If you're in your stand and your bucks always seem to be out past yet, you should ask, why is that?
Right.
And why does the does always come by me, but they always stop and check me out, check the wind? Because the buck has now figured you out and he's hooking you.
Yeah, he knows something.
Yes,
for sure.
And he never had to see you. And you go, well, he never seen me in the stand. I go, guys, he learns from everybody else.
Right.
Just like that fawn didn't need to understand who you were. His mother said, this is the tree we watch. We check the wind and everything.
As we wrap up, anything else to add to that, Tony?
Well, the first thing that you get anybody that's extremely good, they're going to understand deer behavior of big bucks. They're going to have a working knowledge of understanding how that buck is. But then the other thing that they're going to do is they're going to know how that buck uses that habitat. And that's how guys put up great stands, is because they understand the animal and they understand how he uses the lay of the land to move. So now I can determine, where to put your stands. And what I do different than everybody else is when I walk a property, I pick stand locations first, places that I know we can get into, the tree is big enough to hide us. Then I build the new deer world around the tree stand. That's why they're so deadly. And my stands have been in the same trees for 30 some years, and they kill every big buck. Never shot a doe out of them. And yet their design's still working today because I don't overhunt them. And I designed the whole property around them. So now I have so many great stands that when the weather comes, it don't matter which way the wind's blowing, because I've already thought of an east wind, already thought of a west wind, a north, a south, and I have setups for each one of them scenarios.
Good stuff, Tony. So as we end here, so where can people go to check out your stuff? Your website?
Well, my website, you just look up TonyLapratt.com. It's www.TonyLapratt.com. But the main thing is, if people really want to be an extraordinary hunter and really save themselves a ton of time, it's my whitetail boot camp everybody should attend. Guys, I've done over 188 classes, been doing them for over 35 years, and a lot of people think that it's beginners that come here. They're hardcore hunters that have walls better than mine, most of them.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tony. We'll wrap up this segment here, but we're going to come back for another one. So thanks again.
My honor.
Okay, so here are your high IQ takeaways and challenges. Think about how you can change some of your habits and mindsets to mirror that of a mature buck killer, as Tony and I talked about. Are you making some of the classic errors that we discussed? Be honest and figure out what you need to do to change, and if you can't, the Deer IQ test will definitely let you know. And next time I'm joined by someone who has written dozens of books and interviewed hundreds of the biggest buck killers in Michigan. And we see what he says is the common denominator among them all. You won't want to miss that great episode as we continue with the series Mature Buck Mindsets. And I'll see you then.